welcome to the Free Play Arcade podcast, which we may or may not be ready to actually start filming, but why not start now? I'm Chris Delp, the community liaison of Free Play Arcade. I'm joined by another community liaison from Free Play Arcade.
Good afternoon. I'm Arthur Williams, community liaison, similar to Chris.
We're not sure what that means, but here to explain it to us is CEO of Free Play Arcade, Corey Hyden.
Yeah, I actually spent like 6-8 hours trying to figure out what Arthur's title should be.
I'm just glad that I have a title, so when I'm filling out all these applications that I'm rental applications and stuff, I can just put
job.
I can just put a
liaison in there. Like, what's that? You're like, doesn't matter.
It's a job. I don't know, but like, here's something.
So yeah, that was. I really thought I'd come up with some other title, but then I was kind of stuck on that liaison kick, and I couldn't think of any other thing besides community liaison. So we're here today. We're talking about. The premise of this podcast is going to be kind of interesting. We are trying to figure out how to save something that I don't know if anyone at this table even wants to save. GameStop.
Oh, is that the first question? Do we want to save it?
Well, we're going to get to it. So what I want to do, because we're arcade guys at this point in our lives, but obviously we all love video games. We all have probably a robust console collection. We spent a lot of our childhoods, our adolescence, our teenage years, our college years right now playing console games as well. And recently in the news, GameStop has been, suffering. They have just today, I was reading a news article about how the CFO is gone, the CEO is brand new, he's cleaning house. All major executives are pretty much being pushed out for this new CEO. So we're going to kind of give him advice. We're going to look up his name, which would have been nice to have prepared here. And we're going to look up all the information, and we're going to try to give him advice. We're not, instead of just completely ragging on him, though we'll do plenty of that, we want to give him advice. But the first step I want to take here, I want to go way back to, early 90s, mid 90s. I want to talk about what game stores y'all went to when you were buying your console games as, I assume adolescents, teenagers, everything like that. Do you remember? Do you have a favorite one? Give us your stories. So
I really liked the TurboGrafx 16 because I was a big weirdo, whatever. You could not get that at very many stores in town. I was from a small town, College Station. It had a population in the 80s of 20,000 some. And in the 90s, it went up to 30 something low.
College Station, of course, known as the home of
Texas A&M University, home of the fighting Texas Aggies.
Fair enough.
And the largest college football stadium in America.
Still recently.
Is it still?
Massive. It's the entire horizon.
Wow. It's huge, but kind of irrelevant to the story. So there's no game stores there when I was a kid. We never had a GameStop or Funcoland or anything like that. We did get a Babbages at about 1991 or 2. And Babbages was interesting. You could buy the same game in Babbages that you could in Sears or Dillard's or any number of places, but it would cost you $20 more or more. The most expensive old title that I ever saw was at Babbages was Street Fighter Alpha 2 for $105. They would not sell stuff to kids, though, was the annoying thing, sort of.
Wow.
They had a Neo Geo, and I mowed lawns all summer, and I got $750. And I'm 8th grade now.
That's a lot of lawns.
It was a lot.
Young Arthur Williams is just like, give me Splatterhouse and give me another Splatterhouse, please.
Well, anyway, so I went to the Babbages, and my parents never had any idea that I was going to do this because, like, I'm 100% sure they would not have let me spend $750 on a video game console. And I'm like, I want the Neo Geo. And the Babbages kid that was working there is like, I got to ask the manager. Manager comes out and he's
Commerce.
Or something.
No.
And he's like, can I help you? And I'm like, I want to buy the Neo Geo. And I had a huge wad of money. It wasn't all hundreds. It was fives mostly, I want to say.
There's a lot of mowed lawns right there.
It was. My sneakers have been green all summer.
Right.
And just continually mowed lawns and wanted that Neo Geo. And it came with Magician Lord. And I was going to later on buy, I don't know what, probably Samurai Showdown 2 was the game that I actually wanted, but I couldn't afford a game and the system. That's ridiculous. That's $1,000.
Those games were quite expensive.
The guy says, I can't sell it to you. And I'm like, why not? I have the money. And he's like, I can't sell you the Neo Geo. And he's like, you can come back to your parents. My parents would never let me do that. So I ended up getting a Saturn or something.
So your parents were totally unaware that you were trying to do this.
Yes. Or that you play video games at all.
And if they found out that you had $750, they sure as heck wouldn't let you spend it on a console system. So you're kind of stuck there.
So
do you think they thought you stole the money or something?
I think they may have thought that.
Wow.
I mean, a kid with $750, that is a lot of money. I don't know. I think I was in 8th grade at the time, so it would have been, 13? Something like that?
Something like that.
Maybe 3-ish, somewhere in there.
Either way, the important thing here is that Babbages was one of the multiple stores that was bought by GameStop in the late 90s.
Well, and it's
Babbages, EB Games, Funcoland, and Software, etc.
Yeah,
all
everything
became under the GameStop umbrella.
Well, and it's even more complicated than that. So I'm so glad you brought it up. So Babbages, of course, famous Dallas company. Babbages starts in Dallas. Ross Perot invests in Babbages. They were going to be the kings of mall video game software sales. There was also a competitor, Software, etc. And they both do really, really well throughout the mid to late 80s. Eventually, those two merged together, combined some of their stores. Babbages had become kind of like more video game focused, right? And Software, etc. was a little bit more, business, enterprise software, selling copies of Windows and stuff, and also games. So they kind of divided the company so that Babbages would be the video game place, and Software, etc. would be mainly just the software store. And that was like a huge deal because they were kind of running the malls at the time. And then things got complicated in the 90s, right? All the other stores started showing up. EB Games started showing up. Babbages has to reform as Babbages, etc. Once Software, etc. Once it turns out software sales are even harder. And most enterprise software buyers are buying it from big salesmen who come in, do demos, stuff like that.
Yeah, this is about the time that Best Buy is starting to enter the scene as well.
Yeah, you've got a lot of competition coming in.
Circuit City.
Well, and around here we had Incredible Universe came to town.
That's later Fries?
Yeah, so Incredible Universe was the greatest game computer electronics store that ever existed, but it was wildly unprofitable because of everything that made it great. I mean, they had more staff than Fry's somehow, and every one of their staff was super, super well trained, knowledgeable. They had a kids area that was like the most amazing playground ever. I mean, you're talking like N64 comes out, they've got it with a category or a catalog of probably 50 games like ready to play, and you're just sitting in line and they'll let you play whatever you want for as long as you want. It was amazing. They went out of business. It was not a good model, but yeah. So eventually you'll see GameStop start kind of funneling all these swallowing basically every major company. Funcoland, of course, was here. Major Texas player. Funcoland was one of those big, huge early used games.
Yeah, Funcoland
kind of
really
players.
like. It feels like GameStop like taking that Funcoland model of used games and refining it into like just overpricing for the new used games. That was like sort of like what GameStop is.
Right. Well, and Funcoland was kind of cool because it was more like a thrift store for video games.
Funcoland was the place where I was. That was the number one place I wanted to visit in the big city. Living in Louisiana at the time, you would always get EGM or GamePro or something like that. And in my case, all of them. And then look at the back, and then there's the Funcoland ad with just every game you've ever wanted in your entire life.
It says we buy, we sell. And
yes, and I'm thinking
they have prices listed for buying and selling.
Zybots on the NES. Why, I've never seen Zybots on the NES, and there's a price.
Was on the NES.
And there's a price right there in the magazine. Well, clearly I can buy it if I could only get to this magical place called Funcoland in Dallas. And long story short, I never did.
Well, they were really, really cool. They were big. Mm-hmm. They would have these 10,000, 15,000 square foot stores, and it would just be lines of games. I mean, like buckets of games, whatever kind of descriptor. There were so many games at these places, and especially when that NES crossover happened to the SNES and Genesis, that is really when it became a major time to trade in your games, and people would bring hundreds of NES games because NES games, they kind of ran the gamut of pricing and everything. And so people would bring tubs of NES games and just trade them in for pennies, which we'll get to in a second when we discuss GameStop's actual business model and everything. So so Funcoland, that was your dream as a kid.
Yeah. Just because what you're describing is what it sounded like in the magazine, and I had nothing like that. I had a Software, etc. in one of the malls of the northern Louisiana area, and it was disappointing. And imagine my disappointment even further when Funcoland and Software, etc. were combined into the same company called GameStop.
Yeah, so ultimately, all of the major players by the mid 2000s become one into GameStop. Is there any major player? I mean, certainly. I mean, the South.
EB held out for a while,
right? But then they got snapped up.
Yeah, at one point, I recall there being 3 individual separate electronic boutique games in the gallery at Houston. Like, I don't know why. I can remember another time there were 2 GameStops in, what was it? Barton Creek Mall, because one had been an electronic boutique and had been bought by GameStops, and there's just 2 competing GameStops, and you could actually go back and forth and see if they had the same game for different prices. And there was also a Game Fellas there. At one time, one of them was having a stupid sale on like all old games. I bought a copy of Symphony of the Night for like $8 and went to Game Fellas, which was elsewhere in the mall, and sold it for $30. So that's a useless story.
I remember going to GameWorks in Grapevine, Sega GameWorks, early on. I was day one on that one. And they had it was the size of a football field, 2 stories tall, like a pre-modern Dave and Buster's type of like event gaming. Totally awesome when it first started. Upstairs was classic games. Downstairs was like $5 games that had live actors giving commentary and things like that. And then like 6 months into its existence, it started shaking at the rails, and they invited in this new company, GameStop, to open up a GameStop in the arcade.
Interesting.
It was weird.
This is which one?
This was GameWorks Grapevine, and there was a GameStop inside the GameWorks Grapevine after about 6 months.
Crazy. I don't remember that.
Very small, but
wow. What year was this?
99.
Yeah, that would have had to be the very. It could have even been early 2000, but yeah, right around there.
Right. It was during the formation of GameStop as it was acquiring Funcoland and all the other.
That's
things.
such a weird concept to me of just an arcade.
You gotta remember
GameStop inside.
Yeah, it's GameWorks in Grapevine and GameStop, as I don't know if it's already been mentioned, headquartered in Grapevine, Texas.
And you have this kind of period where Barnes & Noble acquires GameStop, right?
That was another weird thing.
In the early 2000s, because Barnes & Noble was a mall player, a big mall player.
Yes.
And they would later, we're talking about a bunch of retail companies that are all going to have their own problems coming up. But
yes, the whole retail apocalypse.
But it was kind of through the ownership of Barnes & Noble, the funding and the available cash reserves, that GameStop was then able to kind of start consolidating everything, because it was really Barnes & Noble buying a bunch of companies and then combining them all, squeezing them all kind of into GameStop, whether it was officially as a GameStop acquisition or Barnes & Noble buying one of these companies and then just basically doing a corporate transfer over to GameStop. So through all of that, GameStop becomes the big player. I'm trying to think of any other major chains. I mean, we've got these kind of
ignoring Amazon, I can say nothing right now.
Well, we've got there's a couple new players, and we'll get to this later, that are these retro game shops that are like franchise models that have been popping up, and I'll have to look up who they are, but I can't think of any major. There's none. Like besides GameStop, at least in the South. There might be something in the North, but as we're talking here, every major Southern game retailer has been acquired by GameStop. It really was where we'd have malls that would have 2 or 3 of the same stores because they got acquired, and the leases were still going on. It took a while to transfer everything, and even
the combination stores have bit the dust. Like say Toys R Us, I remember going to as a kid.
Well, this is gonna be, and it's a really cool because I can let out the secret and it affects no one. The best place to buy games in the mid 90s that were hard to find, Montgomery Ward. No one ever went to Montgomery Ward, but they had a killer game selection.
You never actually got to me, but Montgomery Ward was where I would go buy my Atari 2600 games, because I had to be an entire system behind the generation. So when everybody else was buying NES games, I'm looking for that Yar's Revenge on 2600. Montgomery Ward and Service Merchandise.
Service Merchandise.
Similarly, Sears was a pretty good place.
Yeah.
When Final Fantasy II was $60 at Babbages, it was $30 at the same mall at Sears. And you were just better off going to a department store and seeing if they had the video game you were looking for than going to a real video game store. Which
quick aside and question from my co-host.
One of the crux that matters. Yes.
I want to know. Free Play Richardson, very close to here at the Secret Lab. There is a Sears in the parking lot. I have never in my life actually been inside that Sears.
Oh, I have.
Can I buy anything
Sears.
in there? What is in there?
It's almost. I mean, they're doing their going out of business sale soon. I mean, right now you can buy the actual fixtures, like you can buy the shelves from Sears.
So can I buy a 2600 a cartridge? Because that was the last time I was in Sears.
That seems unlikely.
Probably not.
But you know, one of the things that made these
Funcoland? Is that
like
something?
both
That's
difficult but also awesome places to buy games, like Sears, Service Merchandise, Montgomery Ward, they had all of their salesmen were commission based, and so the salesmen were generally a little bit more harassing, and so you get pushed out into, you know, a lot of kids wouldn't want to go try to buy games there. But the great thing was, if you have a father like mine, he would start paying off these salesmen because they were shady as hell. I mean, Sears, Montgomery Ward, Service Merchandise, these salesmen had no ethics. So you could start paying them, like, you know, throw them a 5 or 10 spot on top of a game purchase. They would hold anything back for you. It was like, I mean, once my dad figured out that there was some way to game the system, he all of a sudden loved video games a lot more because he could figure out a cool little trick to help make sure that I got all the coolest games. Whereas, you know, like your Toys R Us, they'd be sold out. And then your actual game stores, no way.
Yeah.
So we moved through the 2000s. It's a whole... I mean, everything's consolidating, but one of the interesting things is about the early 2000s, GameStop is wildly successful.
Right. Well, consoles really pushed out arcades right in that era.
That's true. It's true.
So GameStop is the big beneficiary as it's gobbling up everybody else. Everybody's also moving to consoles because of the popularity of like the PlayStation 1.
And that started to
64.
happen, in my opinion, because of the popularity of the Nintendo when we were kids.
Right.
And suddenly we were, you know, young adults with a little bit of money to burn. So there were
it was
just
all- it was
more
all-
people that were willing to buy a PlayStation 2, games in that era.
All work together.
And in that era, there wasn't something called the internet, e-commerce. I mean, the internet was around, but the e-commerce thing hadn't really taken off.
In that time period, I would buy games on eBay occasionally,
Right.
and I'd have to go to the post office to get a money order, do things of that nature, because most people didn't take PayPal yet.
Well, yeah, I remember. I mean, buying things on eBay at that point was still a pretty like shady, weird experience. I mean, it was awesome. I loved because eBay really changed the world because all of a sudden, like,
e-commerce is really possible.
It was either Yahoo Japan or eBay Japan that had a really, really cool auction site that
Yahoo.
Yeah, that all of a sudden you have like access to all of these new games, all of these whole new systems, everything in mass. It was no longer like you'd have one store in town that would have an import game. You could go on the internet and you could buy any import game you wanted in the entire world. It was amazing. But it hadn't really taken off, and it certainly hadn't become what Amazon is today, which, I mean, I checked, our company ordered something like 5 Amazon orders per day last year throughout. And what's amazing is you go and, I mean, people have nitpicked, but Amazon is so strong and so fast and so powerful right now that it's...
Yeah.
Now, I don't actually know if I've bought very many games off of Amazon, but then we're also going to get...
bought a few.
We're going to start talking
Amazon's
about...
my number one stop for shopping of anything.
Well, and then the other thing
The
that's
best
going to
thing about
happen is...
Amazon is when you go there, you don't have to go to GameStop.
Well, and then
Correct.
there's going to be beautiful things like, you know, Xbox Live, Steam, all these digital sale, you know, places that you can buy games online and download the game. You don't need to get a physical copy anymore, and that's going to become a whole thing. So
this comes to our first point of how to stay GameStop. Rename yourself Gamazon.
okay,
I like it.
let's go ahead. Let's trash GameStop for a second. So we're going to get to what we think can save GameStop, but let's go ahead and talk about why GameStop is so terrible. Give us one story, Arthur, of your bad experiences at a GameStop.
I think this is my worst experience at GameStop. I was, must have been 2005 or so maybe, and there was a game, King of Fighters Maximum Impact 1 or 2 coming out, and I wanted it because I like SNK Fighters, whatever, and if you pre-ordered it, it came with a hat that I didn't want. That was a Terry Bogard hat that read Fatal Fury across the top, and I'm like, well, I don't want the hat, but it comes with it. Well, I show up at GameStop, and I knew that it came with this hat. I walk in, and there's 2 employees. One's over to the side moving stuff on shelves, and one guy's behind the counter. And the guy that was moving stuff from one shelf to another was wearing a Terry Bogard Fatal Fury cap. And I say, "Hi, I had this pre-order and came out today." And I handed the slip, and the guy gets, "Oh yeah, here you go," and gets the game out. Well, I'm like, "Well, it's supposed to come with a hat." At this point, the other guy ducks into the back, and the guy's like, "Oh, they didn't give us enough hats." And I'm like, that guy's wearing my hat. And he's like, what? And I'm like, the guy that went into the back is wearing my hat. And he's like, no, that's not. And I'm like, look, I ordered this game. It comes with the hat. I want the hat. And the guy's like, well, we don't have enough hats. And I'm like, then I want that guy to cancel my pre-order and give me my $5 back.
Did you get your $5 back?
Yes.
Hey, that's something.
I guess, but I mean...
but it was a terrible customer service experience for you. And I think that is going to become the major GameStop criticism is GameStop operates a lot of stores. And let me actually pull up the actual number because I don't want to overstate how many stores it is. All right, so they have more than 7,200 stores. That is a massive amount. And you know,
it's got to be one of the top of all the country, right?
Well,
we're talking the world.
Well, so the thing about GameStop, and this is something that we can talk about later in terms of maybe having to fix them, their model is to open up in every little small sliver of real estate that they can get. I mean, you're talking like 2,000 square feet each place, and open a ton of them. I mean, they're
inside an arcade even.
Well, there's games, but there's GameStops that exist in places that you would never contemplate opening a retail store just because they wanted it to be kind of a pervasive coverage. Mm-hmm. So with 7,200 stores, though, and targeting, you know, video game players and generally hiring video game players, you're going to have a pretty hard. It's going to be difficult for you to maintain a even kind of customer service experience across that many stores. Like,
yeah, certainly.
And then you have that many stores. Each has to be staffed. Each has to have a manager. All of that stuff. You're gonna have different cultures in every single store that you're fighting against. That you're trying to, you know, solidify and unify. Because what people really want in their life is to be able to go to a store, give a little bit of money, get the product they want, and get out.
Right.
That's sort of not the GameStop business model.
And that is not at all what you get at GameStop. Yeah, because things are weird.
Yeah, there are corporate ways of fighting those unique, you know, cultures and different regional things through formatics is actually where all of my bad experiences from GameStop come through is just, you know, it's not good enough that you can be a GameStop employee and sell the product to your customer. You need to make sure that they go through a laundry list of things that they harass the customer with. And my worst experiences at GameStop involve really not just like me getting punished by can I pre-order this for you? Can I sell you this used? Have you subscribed to Game Informer? Do you have this card? Like the whole laundry list of things that formatics require, and the warranty, all of that stuff that they require the employees to say. The employees don't want to say it either. So I see like this dead look in this person's eye. Like this person is clearly passionate about video games. Well, usually thus they work at GameStop, and you just see this like soulless automaton like repeating everything that they're forced to say, and then you don't want to hear it and they don't want to say it, and it's just an awful experience for every human being in the building.
At the same time, it's no better when they do want to say this stuff.
Sometimes, yeah, you're right.
My girlfriend has a GameStop next to her place, and she gets hassled by the employees there every time she goes. Whether it's asking her if she wants the new Barbie game or something when she's buying whatever, or my favorite was when she went to buy a Switch game, and the girl said, "You should really buy the warranty on this. We get about 5 or 6 or so games a week that people return because they break." It's like, no, you don't. Right. Like that is such a lie.
Yeah.
Well, and we all know why that happens, right? It's they get bonuses, right? They get bonuses based on how many warranties they sell or how many cards that they get people to sign up for, or you know, back in the a few years ago, how many AT&T phones like subscriptions they sell. Like, I mean, GameStop has continually built their kind of culture and their sales culture around upselling something else besides the games. And I guess
that makes for an uncomfortable business.
Right. Well, it makes all of your customers kind of miserable. And it also, you know, given GameStop's current situation, obviously isn't really helping them, right? It's not saving them. It's just them trying to capitalize on a customer that's dwindling. And
I'm imagining most of their sales are just to moms who don't know better. That's the unicorn treatment that your girlfriend has gotten and my girlfriend has gotten with me in the building.
Yeah.
Where they just want to, like, they don't really care unless you have an unaware mom that they can sell infinite stuff to. And any other customer that they run off is irrelevant because, you know, they make their money from one place.
Well, and so,
oddly not from video game players.
Well, and GameStop is, we can talk kind of briefly, the entire ecosystem for video game sales is really hard, especially now. Like, GameStop isn't making a huge profit off of any of the new games that they sell.
Yeah, you get like $7 profit or something per game sold
if you're selling with no incentives, right?
Yes.
And then most modern games launch with different incentives and stuff that shrink that margin down. But GameStop has to have the newest games, right? Because that's how they get people into their place in the first place, where they can sell them things that they have a much higher profit margin, such as used games.
Right.
There was an article I read some years ago about Mass Effect 3 when it came out. It was a pretty popular game. And supposedly for every copy of Mass Effect 3 that GameStop sold, they sold 3 used copies. So people buy the game, sell it back, buy it repeatedly. Well, the used price at GameStop is usually $5 less than the new price. Meanwhile, if you're paying $60 for this game, when you buy it, the first guy and every subsequent guy that sells it back to GameStop only gets like $20 store credit. And store credit, doesn't go that far, obviously, but the pricing differential, instead of being $7 per sale, is suddenly $35 per sale. So it's obvious why they're pushing the used titles. But,
and an important thing to keep in mind here, though, as we talk, GameStop just lost $600 million. So GameStop's, that was in their last yearly report, I believe, it was $665 million they've lost. So we know, based on kind of the evidence and what's coming up, their model doesn't really work. So, like, I sometimes have issues reading online, and I think today I'm going to try to play devil's advocate a little bit more than I would. I guess, let me be clear, I've had a ton of miserable experiences at GameStop. The only times I've been...
Can we make this a two-parter and just make this entire part miserable experiences at GameStop? Because I got more.
So do I.
The only time I've been to GameStop in the last few years would be when, for whatever reason, I have a free night, and I think of a game that came out a while ago on an older system that I wanted to play that I missed out on, like a GameCube game or a Wii game or, something like that. And I think, well, I'm just going to see if one of the GameStops nearby has it. And most of the time, one of like the 5 or 6 within driving distance, and there might be 20 within driving distance. There's way too many of them. And I think that's going to be a huge issue with them. Would have it, and I'd go in there and I'd buy it. And I think at this point in my life, I must just put off this aura or this vibe that makes them not want to talk to me, not want to try to upsell me. Because I walk in there now and they might ask me one question, and after I tell them no the first time, they're just like, "Thank you, sir," and they take my money and we're done.
You don't look like a mom at all.
Right? Well, I can walk in there with, and that's, it's so bizarre to me that GameStop has created this sales culture, which should be targeting gamers, that's where the majority of their sales are going to go. Even though, gamers as a category now is huge. Like it's totally popular culture at this point. Gamers are just everyone, but gamers are people who want to go in and just get their game. It's bizarre to me that they've built a company where the sales thing is harass the people who want to be harassed the least. Gamers, I know, don't want to deal with a bunch of questions, whereas other people in the industry, such as moms buying games, they might be interested in hearing about things like deals or other things coming out. But gamers, they know exactly what they want, and they're going to get it and get out. And the more you harass them, the more they want to go anywhere else. The more they're going to interact. Like, I'm a moderate introvert, right? I don't like random people talking to me, and I definitely don't like being sold to. And I know that is just, a huge major problem with GameStop is 6 or 7 questions at checkout. Do you want this product? Do you want this product? Do you want this product? And 99.9% of the people say no to every single one, but they keep asking because they want to get their bonuses, and they're required to by the company. So it's miserable.
I got a question for you. I got a question for both of you. When was the last time you went into GameStop to purchase a game and purchased that game for your own use?
Probably 3 or 4 years ago. I think
because I can't even remember. And I play games every single day, all the time.
I can't remember. I think my wife Kelsey was either sick or something. I was trying to do something nice, and she wanted to play some terrible Wii Need for Speed for some reason. That was the game she wanted to play. So I spent the day searching for it. So it wasn't for myself, but it was for her. And I bought that probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay, I remember. It was right as the PS4 first came out. I wanted to play Diablo 3 on the console with my girlfriend at the time, and GameStop was closing at 10 o'clock. I called at 9:45 p.m. They could get it to me right then, and my date could continue going. Thus, I went in, got that, and that was the first time in like 3 years.
Halloween 2017. Dean and I like bad games, and a new Bubsy title was being released. There was a limited edition disc release that you could only get at GameStop. So we pre-ordered at GameStop, went in, and the guy at the store was, pretty nice, nerdy guy, whatever. And he's like, I'm very surprised to see anyone buying Bubsy. And we're like, I don't think this is going to be a good game.
Right.
Giddy, hoping that it's not a good game.
Well, I do remember
it was not.
In high school when Grand Theft Auto 3 had come out and Vice City was coming out and these kind of things. GameStop was a really easy place to either get the employees to just sell me something that was a 17 or older buy when I wasn't 17 yet, or GameStop was a super easy place to go just outside GameStop, wait for anyone who looked older than 21 to walk in there and be like, hey guys, will you buy me this game? Every time they would do it. So, and all the other stores had way too much, ethics, morals, whatever they were trying to protect against to do that for me. But GameStop, super easy. The one nearest to my school, which there were actually probably 3 within walking distance from my high school. That's how insane GameStop overgrew. But that was, I do remember those fond experiences because I generally wasn't the one buying the game. I would just pay someone like $5 or $3 to go in there and buy it for me, so I could get my Rampage Grand Theft Auto stuff going.
I'm sure that I would have done that had it been just a little bit younger.
Well, I mean, I posted the other day on our community group my essay about what I wanted Mortal Kombat 4 to be like, and it was this gruesome stuff, and I was like, wow, video games really are violent. Like I had never really fully processed why there was a problem, and of course, it didn't have any long-term effects on me, and video games don't really cause people to be violent, all that stuff. But reading the stuff from when I was a kid, I did kind of understand for a second why people were like, what the heck is going on with these video games?
Mortal Kombat was always over the top.
It was.
I mean, that just was what it was. It didn't have a connection to the violence quite like, I don't know, real world violence. Like I'm a squeamish person, and I've played all the Mortal Kombats and all the Grand Theft Autos, and it's just gratuitous nonsense that never really connects to like actual violence for me. So that's how I feel about it.
All right, so GameStop, miserable experience to go into. That is probably, I mean, if we're gonna start somewhere, we should probably start there, right? I guess we should preface this by saying we're trying to fix GameStop. We're not MBAs at this table. We all are arcade employees and who love video games. Certainly. And there are all sorts of considerations that go into things that we might not be considering here. So if the GameStop CEO actually listens to this, we understand that it is more nuanced trouble. But I can say I would potentially pay a little bit more at a brick and mortar store if it was a good experience. And I think that that's kind of how the service brick and mortar stores have been going. GameStop, I want to pay even less because it's so miserable going into a GameStop.
That's a good point. Yes, you're right.
So you go into a GameStop and you're not happy about giving them any money, even if they're charging what everyone else is. So
you're right. You're absolutely right.
I feel like,
I'm happier giving it to the soulless Amazon.
Right. Step 1 would be, change that customer experience. One
thing that bugs me about them, their new games are, if you don't do a pre-order, then they're open, the discs are out behind the counter. So how is that new?
And they've been dealing with that controversy since basically disc games existed. And it's kind of something that came up too, because every once in a while you'd buy a new game from GameStop and it'd have a scratch or something, and it's because it'd been handled.
That happened.
It's not an uncommon experience.
PS2 Tekken Tag Tournament, pre-ordered it, got it first, scratch on the disc, unplayable, had to bring it back.
I've thought this for many years, but I feel like GameStop was as big of a player as it was in the market, could have said, and give us one extra case that's empty so that we can have it out for display.
Well, I guess the theory there is loss control, because why the heck wouldn't they just have all their games shrink wrapped and on the shelves?
That's specifically why. But if they order one extra empty case, right? Or even not even just a whole case, but just an extra.
Toys R Us back in the day had placeholders, printouts, and you picked up the slip.
You'd see it up in the case, and you'd pick the slip that corresponded, and then you'd take it.
Correct.
But and maybe this is, were people stealing? Were people stealing video games this much?
I'm sure that people had to be stealing video games because they're the size of a CD.
Well, and I guess Target still has it kind of. Targets and locks. I can't think of a game store that does it differently. That's not like a cool local game store.
Best Buy.
And the games are packaged in a way in which they're supposed to sell themselves with the boxing. So you flip it over. Hopefully you get an idea of what the gameplay is or whatnot.
Yeah, but if they just had the extra little
right,
cover
and
slip
then just have the new ones behind
case.
yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that would be fine. The truth is they could GameStop can't right now, from the industry. But they could have even just taken the game out, sold that first one as used for $5 less or $3 less or whatever, as used open box or whatever you want to do it, 10% off, which is your standard retail open box discount.
Well, again, though, they're only getting like $7 per new game.
It's true.
So if you take
that immediately takes the hit.
The person that doesn't care is going to buy that. They have to open another one. So you're just taking a $5 hit per sale of this. They don't have many video games. This is an odd statement to make. You go in there today and it's mostly like video game paraphernalia, right? And they'll have like
profit margin. Imagine it's higher, yeah.
Well, so
I don't know if that's good or bad.
Really quick, I pulled up the actual numbers because I had mentioned it. Let's talk about the current state of what GameStop is facing so that we can kind of see how bad it is. Last year, GameStop lost $673 million. They have enough cash. They've got a couple billion in cash on hand. So they can do that a couple years. And obviously, the new CEO has come in. There's a new CEO that was appointed in March. He's now cleaned house. He's replaced the COO, the CFO, and various executive vice presidents and senior level vice presidents on his team to try to jumpstart it.
I feel like that's definitely a step in the right direction.
Well, I mean, the other
these people are digging a hole. Right. You got to dig yourself out.
So GameStop is in a lot of trouble, and GameStop for a while was trying to look for someone that could potentially purchase GameStop and maybe be in a better position if you took it private. Private equity came in.
It should be pointed out that Barnes & Noble and GameStop
separated.
Separated long ago.
Well, and it was actually, the interesting thing is
Barnes & Noble having its own issues of a similar variety.
Well, and
really
GameStop,
the issue is Amazon, all told.
GameStop was demanding, though, in the mid-2000s to separate entirely from Barnes & Noble because GameStop was sending so many profits to Barnes & Noble that the GameStop managers and executives felt it unfair. And, you know, of course, Barnes & Noble owning them was a substantial value, so they spun it out. And GameStop's been its own beast ever since. And GameStop was posting profits for years. And I think that's always something that'll kind of lull a company into a bad spot. And we've seen it with companies like Blockbuster, where
that's what I think of when we think of this conversation of, like, you know, what to do to make GameStop profitable like it used to be, and it feels like, you know, make their best competitor as inept as Blockbuster, because really that was what would drive me to GameStop, was how bad Blockbuster was. As bad as GameStop was, and it was bad, Blockbuster was worse, but now there isn't Blockbuster to kick around anymore, so, you know.
I feel like maybe online sales really is the way they should be focusing. Maybe slow down, don't ever make any new GameStop brick and mortars, and maybe start consolidating the ones that they have. Because, I mean, like you said, there's 50 in the nearby vicinity.
Well, and
just focus on an online business.
Right, with 7,000 plus outlets. That's a lot of staff. And all the outlets are smaller. So one of the things that they're exploring right now, and we can discuss what we think, is closing stores, but making, like, kind of taking 5 small stores and trying to build a bigger store. That's one of the things they're contemplating testing out right now. So instead of having 5 2,000 square foot stores, have one 5,000 square foot mega store. Which, of course, just saying the word mega store all of a sudden is like, well, every media mega store is gone.
Yes.
So
Suncoast, Virgin,
right.
Can't come up with any others at the top of my head.
They're all gone. They all went out of business. And it seems like a step in the wrong direction, but at the same time, it might cost less in terms of rent for them to do that. And it then depends, is one of their main kind of benefits or main good parts of their business having so many stores that they're always easy to get to. Are people going to drive a little bit further to go to a big GameStop that might have a better used game selection, for example, a better game selection, for example, more paraphernalia, which we can talk about in a second. Do y'all think that this is a good idea going bigger?
Well, is it even going bigger? If you have 5 stores you're consolidating, I mean, it seems like the rent may be less on one slightly larger store.
Yeah, I mean, knowing commercial rent rates, your rent is going to be less substantially than like 2,000 versus 5,000 because you're halving your square footage. Plus, as your spaces get bigger, you generally get a small decrease in your per square foot rate, just because it's harder to lease those larger spaces. And that's the other thing. GameStop is looking at commercial real estate out there where these 5,000 to 10,000 square foot spaces are hard for the larger shopping centers to continually fill because retail is dying in America.
Yeah.
So the theory there is that they would save on rent and personnel, employees. They could staff it with fewer employees.
I thought there's potentially that's a good idea, but the real key is they got to pivot and pivot hard.
Right.
Yeah. They
it has
need to make some
whatever's
changes
going
now.
It has to happen fast. Well, and
So whatever they plan to do with that big store, they need to do something with that big store because the status quo and 5 times the status quo combined into one store is not the answer. You're going to need to pivot hard in a direction, and I don't know which one, but it's going to need to be something.
Well, and GameStop already operates the largest online used game and used accessory store in the world. They also list all of their stuff on Amazon as an Amazon verified seller or whatever. So they already have most of their stuff listed on Amazon. They have the largest used video game store, online store. Now, there are lots of criticisms about the online store because generally you don't know exactly what you're going to get. Sometimes because what you're buying on the online store is there's not like a photo of the exact game you're buying. Mm-hmm. So what it normally is you're buying a used game and it'll say may include case, instruction booklet, that kind of stuff. But
you should assume that you're buying disc only.
Well, but in general, their prices are pretty low. And in general, you're looking at getting just the disc only price. Their price levels are around there, but sometimes you get a bonus is their argument is why they say, it's so hard to take an actual photo of all of our stock because they've got something like, millions and millions of stock items.
Well, if they're trying to sell stuff like that, though, I think they need to actually have a picture.
Well, and some people would say that that's impossible, but we know big companies are able to do things because they have so much money and they have enough money to just throw labor at it. For example, Google Books just spent billions of dollars paying people to scan in pages of books over and over and over and over and over. And we know that GameStop has enough money to potentially hire employees that their job is to assembly line style take an actual photo of what you get.
Especially if they're not working the retail front.
Well, yeah, and so that's the other thing. Like even if you go retail for some of their used stuff, you often don't really know what you're getting until you go to the counter and try to get it. It's such a bad experience. So maybe that is one way to help fix their online stuff because they are already the biggest. But they don't really. I mean, gamers care about quality so much. They care about the case quality, the booklet quality, the disc quality. That it's so amazing. Now, I can say during our spring series, we wanted to do a quick little Smash Brothers tournament, Melee tournament. So I had to buy a bunch of GameCube controllers. Mm-hmm. Through GameStop, I was able to get brand new, or not brand new, but really, really good condition used GameCube controllers, original Nintendo, for like $24 a controller. And they were mint when they came. So it was really bizarre for me because, which to me, that was too low of a price, right? And it was bizarre to me because I just went to GameStop, got them for the lowest possible price that was available online, available locally, and the condition was higher than all of it, which just made me think GameStop clearly doesn't know what they're doing with online sales because those same controllers in a local retail outlet that has regular Smash Melee tournaments probably could have got $40 or $50 for them because those players are super subject to impulse buying and they love good quality old controllers. So
that brings me to an interesting thing that I was thinking about. Would it help GameStop if they're making like a bigger place to have like a dedicated place to just play video games?
Yeah, so that is actually part of the plan. So part of the plan is if you have 5,000 square feet, and if y'all are having issues understanding what 5,000 square feet is, that is Free Play Richardson. Mm-hmm. Free Play Richardson is 5,000 square feet, so it's a good amount of floor space. You could, in theory, at a GameStop, set up your entire store, have an area that it is set up to testing games or playing games or running tournaments, running events, streaming, whatever you want to do, which is all stuff that allegedly this potential concept is what they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. Now, what we all know in this room, this is a really hard thing to get into. Sure. And you can't just like jump in and start running tournaments and stuff. But GameStop is so large with, billions of dollars cash on hand, and they have to save their company somehow. But perhaps this is a good idea. I don't really know. Because like we all know that there are local game stores around us that run tournaments, and that it turns into one of the largest parts of their business.
Right.
And not us. We just lose money running tournaments. But game stores, retailers, that's a good place to make money running tournaments because, like the controller example I just gave,
Sure.
if you have someone that has even a broken controller or a smashed controller,
Well, and if you have someone in your facilities for a few hours, then sell them something.
well, right, you might have a $5 or $10 used game that you have like 10 cents in as the retailer, that they might impulse buy, or that you might have a small concession area with branded energy drinks, whatever we're talking. I don't know what GameStop's plan is, but if you did have that, you're probably going to be able to sell them some drinks and that higher profit margins than games for sure. And then you do have one of the biggest concerns by most like hardcore online people about GameStop. A while ago, they bought ThinkGeek. And ThinkGeek for a long time was really well loved by your online gamer communities, your nerd communities, your geek communities. And that is one of the ways that GameStop has filled their locations with kind of junk through ThinkGeek.
That actually makes a lot of sense with the knickknacks and paraphernalia.
And the profit margin on those is better, but those still aren't high profit margin. They
still have to be designed. A lot of them are humorous in nature, so they have to be changing with the times because humor dates itself very quickly. Just watch any comedy from any era, not this decade.
So a GameStop megastore, 5,000 square feet, streaming / tournament area, huge retail, bigger retail, more used games, fewer employees. Is that a step in the right direction?
I think all of that sounds pretty reasonable. I think focusing a lot more on the internet sales sounds like a really good thing they could do. If they could actually, if you just take the rare stuff, right, like the games that are kind of expensive with the manuals and the cases, and you just make pictures of just that sort of thing, I think they could jack up the prices on those, and that would get them more money.
Well, so here's another thing that's been postulated, contemplated, that I know GameStop, the executives are thinking about, that I also spent some time thinking about. With these more valuable games, so GameStop has access to bigger used market than anyone. They get more trade-ins, more everything. Should they build like a higher end, either if it's just online only, even a higher end version that really focuses on these expensive games? That way they could potentially only take photos of the expensive stuff, and then they could just have their normal online sales is kind of like the liquidation, but then they have like a new branded, I don't know, call it Babbages, throwback.
Well, I think that they'd
online.
have to specifically not have any relation to GameStop when they're doing this, because GameStop has a really bad reputation on stuff.
So a rebranding for this,
Blockbuster.
but you could see if they called it something else. They launched, a subversive ad campaign. Get the good millennial-based advertising companies that come and build an advertising campaign. Jack in the Box famously blew up their clown heads of like in the 70s or 80s as part of their, we're getting better and we're reinventing ourselves. And so they exploded, and then they brought Jack back. That was actually pretty good. But whatever. They have their subversive ad campaign just be like, GameStop sucks. GameStop sucks. Babbages Online is where you get the greatest quality. Whatever they do.
I do like this pivot of calling out GameStop sucking.
Well, so Domino's recently did something like that, right? Where they reinvented their recipes, they got better crust and everything, and they talked about how their old crust, they were just like, it tasted like cardboard. It was total garbage. It was the cheapest stuff we could find, blah, blah, blah. That's old Domino's. We're new Domino's. We're new. So, and many companies have done this throughout history, some successfully, some not, but GameStop doesn't have a lot to lose, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps they should pay some of that billions of cash on hand that they have to do an ad campaign that just addresses head on that they used to suck, that they're trying to be better.
That doesn't sound like a terribly bad idea. I just hope that they could actually have quality behind whatever they're doing with the new branding.
That's the hard thing, I guess.
Which I don't trust GameStop right now.
Well, and I guess, and I've met plenty of amazing GameStop employees.
Same.
And
there's so many of them.
Plenty of bad. Yeah, they've got.
There's like 1 million.
They have 70,000 plus employees.
Okay.
So I've met plenty of good ones and plenty of bad ones, and that's generally true in almost all retail environments. But yeah, it does seem like that they would have to also get their culture kind of pushed out, right? Get the old culture pushed out, even if that means getting rid of the problem employees and everything, trying to truly reinvent themselves.
Yeah.
I don't know. So this is we're talking about things that they could do, but if you're the GameStop exec right now, you've got 70,000 on your payroll every 2 weeks.
Oh.
And you have to make sure all those employees, so you have to keep your revenue going. But perhaps and you can't just automatically go from having 7,200 plus 2,000 or 3,000 square foot stores to having a few thousand 5,000 square foot stores.
No,
you can't just you can't do that overnight.
And one of the nice things about GameStop is if you go to like most reasonably sized smallish towns today, in the Walmart that they have at that town, in the parking lot where they have those boutique shops, there's going to be a GameStop there. And frequently that's the only place where you can get video games dedicated. I mean, you can make your argument that you'd better off just going to the Walmart to buy whatever the same game is.
Do you have internet access in this town?
Probably.
No. Just checking.
Yeah, I can't imagine they don't.
So before we go too long, we should absolutely address PlayStation Network, Xbox Live, and Steam, and the variety of other ways you can buy games digitally. GameStop has no cut of that, and I don't see a path that GameStop could ever get a cut of that. Do y'all have any direction that GameStop could go? Because all of those things are either owned by the console manufacturers. I mean, Sony owns PlayStation Network, Microsoft owns the Xbox Live, Valve owns Steam, and Valve is an actual profitable company. So there's no way. Can GameStop ever get into digital delivery, or have they completely missed that bus?
I think they've completely missed that bus. I really do.
Though I think it's impossible unless they want to make their own digital distribution network. They have sold games that are access codes,
right? The redemption where you can redeem your code
through
on the
Steam or another.
But I don't think that's. I mean, yes, you get some less than 1%. I would make a number up of sales goes to GameStop via this, but I don't think they can do much more than that.
So
and plus that's not going to support brick and mortar stores at all.
But the problem is, as physical media dwindles, and there's people that just only want to own digital things, then what use do you have for GameStop? And the answer to that is you don't.
So
that's me. You're talking about me.
The gaming paraphernalia, sure, but the actual video games.
Every game I've bought since that GameStop experience, which was fine, by the way. I went and bought a console and Diablo 3 in an awful hurry. But if I had already had the console and I had it after that point, I would have just bought it digitally, downloaded it, and played it right that night. And that's every game purchase I've made since.
And I don't...
You're about to hit my other game purchases.
Well, this is going to make some people online cringe, but GOG.com, part of CD Projekt or something like that,
Good Old Games,
is allegedly on the ropes.
Really? That is...
So GameStop could buy Good Old Games?
So I'm just throwing it out there.
Okay, I buy games, I buy it from Good Old Games. If GameStop were to acquire that, I would no longer buy games from Good Old Games. Like, that's it.
So
that's how toxic that is to me.
If GOG is still the same DRM-free gaming and it doesn't become substantially worse, then I can see continuing to support Good Old Games to make sure that... I don't know. I bought a few things off of them.
My GOG queue is longer than my Steam queue, to be honest with you.
Well, and
I don't buy a lot of digital games.
Let me be clear, because CD Projekt is a successful company, but there have been rumors that because CD Projekt is also a public company, that GOG is a pretty big drag on them, that they are generally having to lay off staff, and that it could potentially be an acquisition target. Now, CD Projekt might hate the idea of GameStop acquiring GOG so much that they would never do that, but
it wouldn't matter once they sold it. Like the customer base that they've curated, which might not be paying for their site, would immediately go away. But what does that matter to CD Projekt? GameStop would be wasting more money on something that people could flee away from. I don't think it saves GameStop at all, but might trick 12 people.
If it gets them into the digital market in a capacity where they could actually become a player, that might be something. I don't know. I don't think that it would work out for them well in the long run, and I don't see it going well for Good Old Games either.
Well, so
I think the brand would slowly become corrupted and terrible.
Well, and I think a lot of people have speculated that GOG might not have a place long term in the world.
Maybe not.
because
DRM free. Yeah,
well, they're DRM free, and they were gamer friendly rather than developer friendly, and now we see developers desperately rushing into their own distribution networks. All of this kind of stuff happening, where Steam is the biggest, but Steam has all sorts of DRM. GOG, you buy it, you own it kind of philosophy.
Well, also free-to-play games have been incredibly pervasive.
So, I was just kind of thinking outside the box a little bit, because if GameStop did have some way to get into it, the truth is 7 years ago, 8 years ago, they should as soon as
it was time in the past.
Yeah, as soon as Steam got a little bit of traction, they could have never bought Steam because it's owned by Valve, but they could have developed they could have invested their resources into developing a delivery network, which they would argue back then that if we do that, we're just going to kill our business.
Right,
but someone else was going to come kill it anyways. And
correct.
I mean, that's why Blockbuster didn't buy Netflix.
Right.
And look how well that went out for them.
Disrupting businesses is, a very overused kind of term in the startup world, right? We're going to disrupt this multi-billion-dollar thing. But you can see how dangerous it is for established businesses like GameStop. When Steam disrupts the distribution of video games, it potentially long-term is going to bankrupt GameStop. When Netflix disrupts video rentals or the entire video world, it knocks out large players fast, because all of a sudden these companies were making money, but they weren't building up these fortresses of money that would make them last forever.
Well, someone built a better mousetrap, and
right.
No one's going to buy the old mousetrap.
So GameStop's probably too late, right? So they probably can't get into digital distribution. So their future has to be, and I think the CEO would agree, doing used games better.
True.
Yeah. But there's a problem with that too. Used games had a nice bubble the last few years, but used game stores in general seem to be pulling back and closing down. There was a Game Over Games in Addison that opened up, never got much traction, and is closed now.
There are quite a few Game Over Games closing right now.
The flagship store is one in Austin, and while I was down there for the Killer Queen thing, me and a buddy of mine usually, when I used to live in Austin, we'd go hit up a bunch of used game stores. There was a Play and Trade, there were several Game Fellows, a couple of one-off shops. Most of those are all gone now. One of the Game Overs is gone. The flagship store is now half the size that it used to be, and they're kind of focusing on online sales, but the stock that these places have has gone down, and the prices have gone so far up. I feel like you can't get new old stock as frequently as you used to be able to, and as well as that, there's less people that are interested in buying the old stock that exists.
Well, and I guess one of the things I wanted to make sure I said before we get to the end of this, GameStop gets kind of a bad rap, I think, for their trade-in policies and their used game policies, because as more and more used game stores have become more and more around and independent, I've kind of seen that they all behave pretty much the same.
Yeah.
It's not like GameStop is substantially lower. And in fact, sometimes due to how it works, GameStop might be giving you more than other of these game stores. And GameStop, by and large, and this is, I was reading just a little online article about this, seems to have lower pricing on their used games than your average used game store. So I wanted to make sure I said that I don't think that GameStop is necessarily evil for their practices. I think that they're, not very good at business, at the used game business right now. But I have tons of friends that will go out and buy games for various game stores, and their goal is just to make a profit, right? That's what all of these people's goals are. But there are some more less scrupulous people in this industry that I'm aware of that we've never done business with or anything, but they'll go to garage sales with the pure intention of screwing people over. They're going to try to pay as little as possible for these games, hard negotiate, try to trick people, find mispriced stuff, that kind of stuff, and then take them to their game stores and sell them for a huge profit, which GameStop, of course, doesn't do that. They don't go to garage sales or anything.
No, they're a little bit too big to worry about something so
I just want to point out that the used game world, and I'm saying this as someone who's bought millions of dollars worth of used games, mostly arcades, is rot and bad, with tons of people who are out there screwing people over. So I always thought that was really funny when people would make fun of GameStop in particular, and they just happen to be the biggest, but it is not like it's not like you're going to make money as someone trading in games, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. That's not like a good way to,
I don't know.
to
They
get
just have
value.
a corporate culture of screwing people over. Like it just like you don't get a good value on your trade in, and then you're paying too high of a price for the used game. That's their corporate culture, and it has nothing to do with the individual in front of you just doing his job. So unlike the person going around from garage sale to garage sale, you know, mining your garage for something where you're going to get screwed.
Well, and the other thing is,
it's more like come to GameStop. You get screwed the moment you walk in the door, period.
but you'll never walk into a GameStop with a high value game and get $1 because you don't know the difference. That happens all the time in smaller ones because they might get the sense
$5.
Well, they might get the sense that, you know, this person is a sucker, you know, or it's a mom selling her son's games or anything. GameStop, they have their set prices.
Right.
They
just go straight for the low. It's all $1.
But if you look at the actual trading values that GameStop is giving right now, many of them are higher than what you'll get at other used game retailers.
Yes, but if you were to sell it on eBay yourself, you would 100% get far more money. I mean, the difference is you have to get an envelope and a stamp.
Well, and I mean, you have to deal with what happens if the buyer says it arrived damaged, and you have to. There's a lot of risk there, and everyone should sell all their stuff on eBay or even as an Amazon seller. Like, it's very easy to do. It takes very little work, and you can get more money than any other way.
Yeah, I'm not likely to want to go sell my games or anything anytime soon, but if I were to do so, I'd do it piecemeal on eBay to make the maximum amount of profit.
Right. I would never recommend trading games to a used game store.
Every time I even hear about like a friend doing that and I'm interested in the game in any way, I'm just like, I'll just give you cash.
Well, I did that in high school. I kind of became the guy that people would liquidate their collections to in high school because I was just like, they're like, we're going to go to GameStop and trade in all of these really cool games so that I can get a new game system. And I was just like, no, I'll give you the money. Let's cut that out. But I guess just my whole point is all of the game stores do this, not just GameStop. And there are very few game stores that don't like that have, which makes sense because all these game stores have to exist forever. And GameStop with their models right now just lost $600+ million. So even if you say GameStop is aggressively screwing over the consumers, they just lost $600 million. So they're not doing a very good job of it.
Have they been losing money year over year?
No. So GameStop has had, GameStop hasn't been wildly profitable for the last 10 years. They've had 3 years of losses, 7 years of gains.
Wow.
But this last year's loss was massive, concerning, and might be reflective of a lot of bad things to come. And GameStop, for example, has had a lot of lucrative things that they've been selling off, like their AT&T store play that they made a while ago. They had all these AT&T resellers that were actually making money. They've spun that out so they could get their money out of them. So they have a nice pot of cash right now, but they also have a company that just lost almost $700 million.
I just feel like they're reaping what they sowed for a decade, if not more. And what they sowed is a field filled with salt. They gotta get out of the field. Like if they have money from the past decade of this toxic environment they created, that's good. They should take all that money, get completely out of the industry, and find what their new industry is. Because it ain't.
You think they should just liquidate it and return to the stockholders?
I think it's inevitable.
That sounds not terrible.
I think it's inevitable. Like whether they do it or not, they're dead. That's what I think.
The truth is, they probably have so many long-term leases signed right now that they can't act. They can't legitimately. They can just give all their money through bankruptcy courts to various real estate
it's already too late.
So, well, no, it's not. It's not already too late, and that's kind of the point of this podcast.
They have facilities and employees.
They have a pot of cash. They have a bunch of leases, a bunch of obligations, but also a bunch of money that they can spend trying to fix themselves. They and if they don't, they just lose. So they have to try to fix themselves.
I would say try for one more year, and if they have another year of losing $500 million, then it's time to. Time to liquidate. You can liquidate over time and try to not just get sued into submission by everyone that you elite.
I think they are proposing having fewer stores and everything, but
that's a good idea.
Go as an ongoing enterprise. I feel like that they would hear you be like, give it one more year, try to fix it in 1 year, and they say that that's not a reasonable timeline to have 70,000 employees, 7,000 stores, and successfully redevelop their entire company. And I hear what you're saying. They're screwed if they try anything, but that's not really that's not good advice, right? Well, you can't go to someone and just be like, well, you lose.
They have a store, they have employees, so like they have a potential to do something. They can do something with the store.
Well, and
so,
they clearly have a lot of value in terms of a massive stock of used games that is larger than anyone in the entire world could ever conceive of. In an environment where used game values are still increasing. So they have that. They have ThinkGeek, a generally well-liked company still that makes goofy, fun little things that still is successful at doing that. They've maybe failed by putting so much of that schlocky crap in their stores because how are you ever going to make enough money off of that stuff? Like, of course, like, and I guess there are ThinkGeek stores now. I didn't really realize this, but I guess that has happened. And to me, that sounds like a dumb idea, but I don't really know what the margins on these ThinkGeek stores are. But
I'm not going to GameStop to buy games, so I'm not going to go to ThinkGeek to buy games either.
From what I understand, the schlocky stuff represents like a fraction of it's like 3 or 4% of their overall revenue. Their revenue is games and used games, and they have to figure out used. I mean, what the current CEO believes, I think, based on the statements that I was reading, that they have to figure out used games or they're dead. Because they can't make enough money off of new games, and new games eventually there's just not going to be physical copies of new games.
Yeah.
That's going away.
That means they're dead, right? That does mean they're dead.
Well, except the value of new used games is still going up like crazy, and no one's going to make more used games. And consoles are still going to have to be bought somewhere. And you've got things like NES Classic, the new Genesis one coming out. These kind of things that are you have to get a physical entertainment thing. And long term, I think that there is the thought that there might still be a market for a lot of these little micro consoles, that kind of thing, in the long term. So they think that there's some new stuff coming out that they'll always be able to sell, but they also recognize it's these millions and millions of used games that exist. That, like NES will be re-released as the NES Mini, but also people still want to buy the physical NES games.
Mm-hmm. But what percentage of GameStop's profits, I wonder, are the actual old games?
I don't have that in front of me, but if I remember, their revenue was something like 60% used games was accounted for 60% of either their profit or their revenue. So
but I'm sure that it's mostly used games the previous maybe 2 console generations. Definitely not.
It is
PS2, but maybe PS3.
Well, except yes, I think that's absolutely true right now. But I think that their goal potentially is to get even more old, like make sure that they're facilitating sales online of these older games, and keep intaking these older games better, because they think that, with their current state, that's their only chance. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that we just worked ourselves to is, they might just be dead. But that, we're here. We've gone through some of their options. I mean, these mega store things, that sounds interesting to me, but that's a lot of capital investment they need to make.
Downsize hard.
I think downsizing is the way to go, but try to downsize to where you're not really losing the farm the whole time.
Well, and of course they also have.
I'm not saying don't invest in something else. Something new.
What we've kind of said is they have to.
They have to.
They have money, but they don't have an existence, so they have to invest in something new. Mega stores, esports. Who knows?
There you go. Any of these are options.
They have gotten into the sponsorship of esports, but
commerce is still happening out there.
No
Just go
one
find
seems to think that sponsoring esports is really going to make money.
I don't think it's
and esports in general has a difficult path towards profitability, but we've got things like a $10 million esports stadium in the area. Why didn't GameStop do that? Like, those are the kind of projects, like GameStop is the kind of place that could potentially monetize an esports stadium profitably. They could potentially have a small GameStop setup, but they could also be the ones who run the events. There's no reason they can't.
Yes.
I hear what people would say is, culturally that's just not something that they could possibly do. But
those people that work at GameStop, yes, they can. Yes, they will.
Well, right.
Those people are the future generation of the gaming culture. Because there's so many of them.
Well, GameStop has enough money to actually just, if none of those would work, they have enough money to hire outside talent. It's not like, I think that esports is so complicated, but it's not like GameStop doesn't have enough money to go hire the best esports producers, the best showmen, and they could have just built this exact stadium. And I know, of course, I'm not actually saying that they should have, or that they did, or that they will.
I think it makes as much sense as the Cowboys doing it.
But yeah, I wonder in my head why they didn't start 10 years ago getting bigger. they didn't get into the better, less expensive real estate.
That money that they were bringing in that day was just too big in their head.
Well, it is
that money's never going anywhere.
Why change something that works? Because I mean, that's literally a post I just made yesterday about why Richardson isn't moving, because you don't change something that's working, and that is a realistic business proposition. So, wow, they could be screwed. We don't really know. I actually, one of the reasons I want to do this podcast is I have an email from a VP at GameStop that I haven't responded to, because some people have said, hey, maybe they should get in. I don't know what this is about, but some people have said, hey, maybe they should get into like the barcade business.
Hey, pivot hard into something that is working, and
which of course I think most analysts would squirm at that, because bar business it is a lot harder. But yeah, they have to do something.
The GameStop barcade is another place that makes me want to like hurl myself off of a cliff.
Yeah,
I can see it now. A dozen Pac-Mans on flat screens.
But you're never gonna have games. You're never gonna run as a GameStop. But if they invested in a what was the one that Palmer posted the other day? They were running on kind of a hybrid kung fu model, but they're not. You're Cobra out in Arizona. GameStop could make a select investment in that, slowly acquire that company, and grow that exact brand, which is like a better version of the kung fu model that we have here in DFW and in Austin. You can see paths. I mean, and maybe that's what GameStop should just do with their money. They've got a pile of cash. Invest in everything. Just start taking shares in every single gaming thing and pray that something works to save your company. I don't know. But GameStop is a local company. They employ a lot of people. We don't like to see people out of business. And
of course not.
In general, we like video games, and I think that the world is served by having video game stores.
In general, I've liked GameStop employees that I've met over the years. They've all been, they have been us. They are gamers. So
we've come up with like 3 things that they could try that we have no hope for, but I guess that's kind of where we are. We have no special thing. I wish them luck. I think that the world would be much worse without a major retailer.
I think if GameStop became a place where I wanted to shop, then it'd be better for the hobby.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe one day we'll have a GameStop that has a back that has 20 arcade games. They've got a bar set up. Who knows? Maybe they figured out commerce. Because no one else really has. It should be probably one of the last things we say. Retail is dying everywhere. It's not. GameStop isn't unique. GameStop is facing the same problems that everyone has, but twofold, because there's digital distribution and Amazon instead of just Amazon. And physical games are disappearing. It's a whole. GameStop has some trouble. I don't really know how they get out of this, but that was us talking about it for like an hour.
We fixed it. Congratulations, guys.
We did it. We have solved the problem. Maybe they should hook up with Jaden Smith, get involved with Just Water, save the world, give people clean water. It'll be amazing.
I do like water. It's delicious.
So maybe they need gamer water. Is gamer water a thing?
Probably, and that makes me sad.
GameStop needs GameStop needs GameStop energy drinks, but like they need to make it totally absurd.
Well, actually, no, energy drinks are fuel. Mountain Dew drinks.
Oh. Man, how does Mountain Dew done that for so long? It's really impressive.
They do it like once a year.
I need the nearest cliff. I'm going to see you guys next week if I survive.
So this was us forcing Delp to be positive about GameStop. So I want you all to just listen to this podcast again. That is Delp's positive GameStop podcast. So
I hope GameStop becomes the place that I want to shop. Good luck to you, GameStop.
We are out of here. That is another Free Play Arcade podcast where we make fun of a public company that is much bigger than us and have 3 people who don't have MBAs solve a problem that a whole boardroom full of MBAs are working on. But GameStop hires some sort of ridiculous marketing campaign. Go nuts. Totally trash yourself and try to reinvent yourself, because that might be the Hail Mary that can actually work. Keep it exactly as they are, except reinvent themselves entirely. Blow it all up and come back with the exact same product, but better. All right, that's it. We're signing off. Free Play Arcade Podcast is out.
Bye, everybody.